What is up, guys? My name is George, and today I will be showing you how to set up your Raspberry Pi so that your screen looks exactly like this right here. If I can just get the camera to focus. Alright, perfect. So let's get started with the software side of things. Alright, so before we start actually messing around with the Pi, the first thing you're going to need is an SD card. Either a 2 GB or a 4 GB or higher, though a 4 GB or higher is really recommended. And you're going to go to raspberrypi.org/downloads, and right here you are going to download this operating system, the Raspbian Wheezy one. There's a torrent link and then there's a direct download link. I usually just use the second one. So once you click on this, it'll download and you'll be able to unzip it and use it. Now, you're also going to need Win32 Disk Imager. So click on this link. It'll open up in SourceForge. Click download. It'll download in the exact same way, excuse me. And you're going to use Win32 Disk Imager to actually install this. You can't just copy it over. You have to install it, mount it like an imager. Awesome. So once you have both of these files downloaded, you will right click on one of them and hit extract to the folder. Now I'm using WinRAR. You can use 7-zip or you can just use the built-in Windows utility. So extract both of them. Probably gonna have to wait on this one a little bit, and then you're gonna go into, after this one is done, you're gonna go right here into Win32 Disk Imager. There's gonna be an exe file in there. Now that exe file, especially on my computer, is kind of problematic because it takes a long time to come up. So I guess I should start it now. Hit yes, and oh wow, this one actually came up quite quickly. So perfect, that worked out really well. So here's the Win32 Disk Imager. Once this is done extracting, we're going to start working in here. Alright, so it's done extracting, and now right here you have the option to select the image file that you need to write to your device, which you select right here. It's going to be defaultly selected by default, excuse me, your SD card. And right here, you click that little folder icon, pick the image file, and then you're going to hit write. But before you hit write, you need to make sure that your SD card is completely empty. Even if you want to override the stuff, it needs to be empty, because if you try to override it, you could corrupt your SD card and make it not usable at all. So you need to make sure that your SD card is completely empty. Select the image file, select device, and hit write. Alright, so here I have the Raspberry Pi, and a word on handling the Pi before we start. Before you touch any components on it, you should touch the metal parts on it. So that's the Ethernet port, the USB ports, the HDMI ports, anything metal on it basically. You should touch that before you touch the CPU or any of these other internal things. And that will really make sure that you don't shock your Raspberry Pi, because it's an exposed piece of hardware. I mean, it's a circuit board basically. And if you shock it, you could fry your processor, the RAM, and basically just ruin the whole thing. So before you handling it, make sure you touch these metal parts. And if you're moving around a lot, I have a carpet floor, so if you're moving around on carpet, always touch the metal parts before handling the Pi again. Generally, is a good rule of thumb, really. Whenever you're handling it, just hold on right here to these metal parts. Alright, so before we start actually doing anything on the Pi, I will go over the ports here. So this is an HDMI port, this one right here. This is an Ethernet port. These are two USB ports. This is a 3.5mm jack for audio. This is an old RCA port for older TVs. And right here on the far right, you can see a micro USB slot, which is how you power the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so once you have your SD card all set up with the operating system and everything on there, the way that you insert this into the Pi is you flip it over and you insert the card right here to the right. Now, you need to make sure that these golden pins on the card match up with the golden pins on the slot, and so you just take it and you slide it right in. You just have to push it all the way in. And this really isn't much of a difficult process, so there's not really a click or anything. You just have to make sure that it's in there pretty tight. And that is basically how you put your SD card in there. So now we have the operating system, we just need to get the software hooked up and we're good. So to hook everything up, you first have to take the cable that connects to your TV, in my case the HDMI cable, and plug it into its slot. The HDMI cable in particular is a tough one to plug in, so you have to push a little bit. But don't break your Pi. Alright. So when it's in, you'll hear a click, and then I'll take my keyboard and plug it into this USB slot, and plug my mouse in the bottom slot as well. Finally, the last thing that we need to do is plug in the micro USB cable to power the Raspberry Pi, and we will be good to go, and we'll be able to go into the Raspberry Pi software. Alright, so now you take your micro USB cable and plug it in the right here into the little slot that I showed you. Alright, so once it's plugged in, you should hear a little click, and when it's plugged in, you should see this red LED start to work on the Raspberry Pi. Now, this cable right here is a phone charger, and I'm from the United States, so most of our phone chargers have a standard that works with the Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you're from the United States, so I'm not sure if your cable will work, so you'll have to check the voltage on that. But if you're from America and have a phone charger like this, then you can just plug it into the Pi and it will work. Alright, so moving on to working with the software and getting everything booted up to the Raspberry Pi desktop. Alright, so here we have the, so to speak, blue screen of the Raspberry Pi that you will see once you boot up your Raspberry Pi for the first time with a new ROM installed on your SD card. So here you can see that you have a bunch of options, and you can use the up and down arrows on your keyboard to navigate through them, and use the enter to select them. So basically these are all optional, but the thing that you need to do before going on is to go down to the second option and hit enter, which will set up your SD card for rebooting. But there are some things here that you might want to do first, like change your time zone, for example. So go down to that option, and when you hit enter, it will enter a new screen. Here you have a bunch of, I guess, regions to choose from. I'm in the United States, so I hit enter on that option, and I'm also in the eastern part of the United States, so I hit enter again, and you'll see a bunch of stuff pop up on the bottom of the screen, and we're back to the main screen, except this time your time has changed. So once you've done everything you want to do, you can overclock it, you can change your password. By the way, it'll ask you for a password once you boot up, but once you've done the stuff that you want to do, go to expand root FS, or the second option, and hit enter. So you'll see a bunch of text flash at the bottom of the screen, and you'll see this message. So hit OK. Alright, sweet. So now you go down and hit finish, and it asks you if you would like to reboot. So hit yes. Then you'll see a lot of stuff pop up at the bottom of the screen. And actually, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit here. There we go. You can't really see it very well, but it'll reboot, and you'll see a bunch of letters come up and start scrolling. And you might notice that it's shifted left. So in my next videos, I'll show you how to change the resolution so that it's not shifted left. But once all this finishes coming up, it'll ask you for a login and a password. So let's see if I can maybe zoom in into my TV here again. Alright, perfect. Right on time. So now here it says Raspberry Login. So for that, you'll type in PI, like in Raspberry Pi. So here, let me show you my keyboard. Zoom it out. And as I said, just type in PI, hit enter. Okay, sweet. Now it's asking you for a password, and the password is Raspberry, like in Raspberry Pi. So you'll need to type that in. But while you're typing it in, it won't actually come up on the screen. So on my keyboard, I type RASPBERRY and I hit enter. So nothing came up, but it still let me in. And so when this green text comes up, you need to type in start X. No spaces, capitals, or anything. Just as you see it on the screen, start X. Hit enter. And once you hit enter, you'll see a bunch of text flash up again, and I'll zoom out. And look what we have here. The Raspberry Pi screen. So you can see me dragging my mouse around there. You can use this now just like a normal Linux machine, except it's a little bit less powerful. And yeah, go out there and do cool stuff. This is George signing out.